Greetings, friends. You are on the Ruslan Bailov channel. Today we will take a detailed look at the situation in Ukraine as of the 15th of December, 2025. Over the past 24 hours, a truly large number of extremely significant events have taken place, so I suggest we move straight to the overview without delay. And as is tradition, I would like to sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel if you are not watching my videos for the first time and are not yet subscribed. By subscribing, you help the channel grow. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. Let us begin with the Zaporizhzhia direction, from which an especially large flow of information is currently coming. Moreover, it is here that, most likely, the key events of the day are unfolding. If we speak about the western Zaporizhzhia sector, then according to incoming reports, units of the Russian army have moved beyond the settlement of Stepnohirsk and continue active advancement northward, toward the northern outskirts of the settlement of Primorska. Individual units are advancing along the M18 highway in the direction of Vasilivka. In addition, active movement of Russian forces is being recorded in the area of the settlement of Kupiansk. At the moment, this information is mainly being published by pro-Russian cartographic resources. So far, these reports have not been confirmed on the maps of other analytical services or in the reports of independent experts. Therefore, we will closely monitor the further development of events in this sector of the front. Next, we move to the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, from which, as I mentioned earlier, the most important and high-profile news is coming today. I would like to remind you that just the day before, information appeared about the complete clearing of the settlement of Varvarivka by Russian units. Already yesterday, a number of cartographic services made changes west of the R85 highway, as well as west of the channel of the Haichul River. In addition, based on reports from certain pro-Russian analysts, further adjustments were made indicating that Russian forces managed to cross the river and establish positions on the opposite, Ukrainian bank, including the capture of several large strongpoints. One of these strongpoints, clearly visible on satellite imagery, was completely cleared by the Russian army, and consolidation is currently underway there. It is important to note that this strongpoint is located on elevated ground. Another fortified position is located west of the settlement of Zaporizhzhia and is also clearly visible on satellite images. Thus, already yesterday the first objective evidence appeared, indicating that Russian units managed to cross the Haichul River at 2 points and begin a gradual advance westward. Today, the situation in this sector was further clarified. Moreover, during the day, additional adjustments were made around the initial areas of advance based on new data from pro-Russian experts. It is important to note that today's information about the advance was confirmed not only by interested sources, but also by neutral cartographic services. The key event of today, however, was the arrival of information from territory located somewhat north of the two aforementioned breakthroughs. According to statements from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, as well as reports from a number of pro-Russian experts, another settlement in this sector has come under the control of the Russian armed forces. Today, a short video was also published, dedicated to the fighting for the settlement of Pishchani. We will not watch it due to the large number of violent scenes, but it is worth noting several fundamentally important points. First, the video does not show Russian servicemen raising flags. This is essentially the only, but extremely telling detail. However, this situation is quite understandable, since, judging by everything, the front line in the area of Pishchane currently runs directly through the settlement itself. As of today, information has already been recorded, indicating that Russian units have managed to cross the Haichul River at 3 different points. If all these areas are plotted on the map, it becomes obvious that the further movement of Russian forces is directed toward the settlement of Ternavate. It is assumed that the assault on this settlement will be carried out simultaneously from 3 directions, from the south, from the east, and from the northeast. In the near future, it is precisely from this sector that we are likely to see and receive a huge amount of various video materials. The absence of videos with flags is explained by the fact that the front line currently runs along the river, and publishing such materials could pose a serious danger to Russian units. Apparently, a decision was made to limit publication to informational updates without demonstrative footage. Heavy and fierce fighting is currently underway in this direction. To help you understand the scale of what is happening, At the present moment, the attention of NATO generals, American, French, German, and British military analysts, as well as Turkish and Russian intelligence services, is focused, seemingly, on a small village called Ternavate. Today, this is exactly where the eyes of everyone who professionally monitors developments and understands the overall logic of events are directed. Kupiansk, Pokrovsk, Myrnohrad, and even the Sumy direction have temporarily faded into the background. Right now, the outcome of events in this small square, rectangle, or, if you prefer, this conditional oval on the map is being decided. If Russian units manage to firmly consolidate in this limited area and advance directly to Ternavate, this will mean that the situation has approached a point at which peace agreements perhaps should have been signed half a year ago, rather than postponed indefinitely. We will continue to closely monitor developments in this sector. It is also worth paying attention to an important detail. The Russian army began moving west of the Hychel River significantly earlier than the clearing of the settlement of Huliaipol was fully completed. This circumstance may say a great deal. It cannot be ruled out that the strike toward Huliaipol was of a diversionary nature and was intended to draw as many Ukrainian units as possible into dense urban areas. Alternatively, the Ukrainian side may still be managing to hold positions there, causing the Russian offensive in that sector to somewhat deviate from the overall timetable. At the same time, the advance west of the Hychel River, slightly to the north, appears smoother and more consistent than directly in the Huliaipol direction. In any case, we will continue to observe how events develop. However, even now it can be said that what is happening represents an extremely alarming signal for the armed forces of Ukraine, and likely causes serious concern among Western military circles as well. Now let us move to the Pokrovsk direction, from which a significant volume of information is also coming today. We will start with the situation in Myrnohrad. Russian units have improved their positions along the entire perimeter and have fully taken control of the Rodinska mine, as well as the spoil heap of the Novator mine. These data are today confirmed by a number of neutral cartographic services. In addition, Russian forces have almost completely cleared the southwestern part of the northern sector of Myrnohrad. At the present moment, only a small section along the M32 highway remains under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. It is difficult to determine the exact number of Ukrainian personnel still present in this area. According to sources from a week ago, there may have been around 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers in this sector, but that information is already outdated. At present, it is extremely difficult to assess the real number of remaining units. I would also like to remind you that over the past several days, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation has repeatedly stated that the Ukrainian side carried out a series of counterattacks from the settlement of Shevchenko. The goal of these actions was an attempt to unblock Ukrainian formations located in the territory of Myrnohrad. And today, apparently, footage of objective control has begun to appear, showing exactly how these counterattacks were conducted by the armed forces of Ukraine. In these materials, we can observe a Ukrainian tank entering the territory of a farming complex and, from those positions, striking surrounding structures. Thus, these images confirm the fact that the Ukrainian army did indeed conduct attacks and counterattacks toward Myrnohrad and Pokrovsk, advancing along Olympijska Street. The strikes were carried out directly from this position against the farming facilities, which in turn indicates that these farms are currently under the full control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. I would also like to remind you that, according to the official information from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, the attack that was carried out several days ago ended in failure, and units of the armed forces of Ukraine were forced to retreat to their original positions. We now move on to the Kostyantynivka direction. The greatest level of activity here is being recorded on the southwestern flank along the H20 highway. As you can see, certain adjustments have appeared on the maps. The bulk of the information from this sector today comes from pro-Russian experts, although part of this data is also confirmed by neutral cartographic services. After a fairly long operational pause, which was most likely connected to regrouping, the Russian army has resumed offensive operations along the Oleksandro-Kalinov line, with further movement northward along the H20 highway, toward this same road between several settlements. Russian units are gradually reducing the distance to Stepanivka and Bereztok. Active combat operations are currently underway in this sector. It cannot be ruled out that in the near future the map will undergo more serious and intensive changes. In the Siversk direction, the Russian army continues its offensive toward the settlement of Sloviansk. The advance is being carried out both along the M03 highway, information that is today confirmed by a number of pro-Russian and neutral cartographic resources, and west of Siversk itself. Already now, it can be stated that the distance from the forward positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, located west of Siversk, that is, beyond the city limits, to the city itself is 3 kilometers and 220 meters. In other words, not only Siversk itself is under the control of Russian units, but also a fairly extensive buffer zone to the west of it. We observe that in this direction, the Russian army is acting actively and consistently. At the same time, it is evident that, at least in this sector, the Ukrainian side is not planning stabilization measures. Apparently, attempts to stabilize the front line may begin closer to such settlements as Kaleniki, Kriva Luka, as well as Rai Oleksandrivka. Next, we move to the Borova direction. Today, the Russian army is conducting active assault operations in the area of the settlement of Korovyi. A significant amount of information is coming from this sector. After Russian units managed to reach the southeastern outskirts of the settlement and establish positions there, they began a gradual flanking maneuver around Korovyi, both from the west and from the east. Most likely, in the near future, the flow of news from this direction will only increase. At present, the Russian army is striving to get as close as possible to the Oskil River in order to establish full fire control over the supply line that runs from the Izium direction through Oskil, Lozova, and Pisky-Radkivsky toward the settlement of Borova. At the same time, Russian units are gradually assaulting Borova from the north as well. Today, a large number of clarifications and various micro-events are coming from the area of the settlement of Bohuslavka. According to the latest adjustments, it can be stated that Russian units have already come right up to the R79 road connecting Bohuslavka and Borova. In all likelihood, this highway has already been physically cut. At least this is what various pro-Russian experts are claiming. It is possible that the Ukrainian side still retains the ability to receive supplies through a small forested area located along what is essentially the former channel of the Oskil River toward Borova. However, overall, it is becoming clear that Russian units are taking Borova into a kind of pincer, exerting pressure both from the north and from the south. In the Kupiansk direction, the armed forces of Ukraine continue their counter-offensive actions on the western outskirts of the city. If we speak about the situation around Kupiansk as a whole, one thing is clear. The maps that you may see on various resources, whether pro-Ukrainian, pro-Russian, or neutral, apparently do not reflect the real situation and do not correspond to the actual conditions on this sector of the front. The Ukrainian army continues its counter-offensive. Moreover, today even pro-Russian experts have acknowledged that the Ukrainian side is indeed actively counter-attacking. Fewer and fewer neighborhoods, quarters, and individual blocks of western Kupiansk remain under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The Ukrainian side is attempting to split this sector into several micro-areas and micro-blocks, which it then plans to deal with individually. Russian units are holding their positions to the last, not retreating, and offering fierce resistance. However, due to serious logistical difficulties, maintaining a high level of combat effectiveness is becoming extremely challenging. Despite this, fighting continues, and Russian forces still control the core of western Kupiansk. At the same time, the Russian army is gradually improving its positions in the Sumy direction. It was from this sector that Ukrainian units were redeployed to reinforce the Kupiansk area, which has resulted in certain problems with unit manning here. The Russian Federation has taken advantage of this situation and launched its own localized counteroffensive. Today, information is already emerging that Russian units have begun assault operations in the area of the settlement of Andriivka. We will continue to closely monitor how the situation develops in this direction. At the same time, there is a high probability that, against the backdrop of the crisis in the Kupiansk sector, the Russian army may exploit the current situation in the area of the city of Sumy and intensify offensive actions there over the coming months. That concludes today's update, dear friends. Thank you for watching, subscribe to the channel, support the video with your likes, and all the best to you.